In full transparency, I'm publishing late today because I don't know the answer to this question, and I've struggled with it all day. I think it's important to admit when you don't know the answer, whether it is work, whether it's life, whether it's college football, whatever the case may be. I think it's important to say, I don't know, when you don't know. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question of whether DJ Durkin should be a defensive coordinator in college football. I don't know the answer of how long is long enough. How big of a punishment is the correct punishment when under your direction, under your tutelage, under your supervision, whatever word you want to use, somebody died. And DJ Durkin's not alone in that. Brian Kelly's in that same spot too. How long is too long? How long is the right punishment? When is it okay to let bygones be bygones in a situation like this? And I'm not taking the moral high ground because I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to the question of any of those questions. Should DJ Durkin be the defensive coordinator at Auburn? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how even I would feel about it if I were Hugh Freeze and I was looking for what seemed like a slam dunk defensive coordinator hire. It appears as if DJ Durkin is a spectacular defensive coordinator in his past history. Then you weigh the fact that as your one chance as a head coach, you're accused of kind of this culture of bullying and being past hard-nosed coaching. And I think there's a difference there. That there's a difference between being hard-nosed or old school or whatever word you want to use and being negligent. And people working under your direction were extremely negligent in what led to the death of a young man. And so I struggle with that. I struggle with the idea of how would I feel if my favorite team hired somebody who was, and again, Jordan McNair did not die at Maryland under DJ Durkin's direct supervision or whatever. DJ Durkin won there. So I think that's important context to note. But at the same time, like ultimately, you're responsible for that program, correct? And people working under your direction, under what guidelines you have set, trying to implement and create the vision that you have created for them, were negligent in the death of a kid whose body temperature got to 106. And so I struggle with that question of what is the answer? Should DJ Durkin have a job in college football? And I don't think Brian Kelly ever got nearly enough flack for the young video crew member who died in a forklift or a scissor lift accident in 45-mile-an-hour winds. That just sort of got brushed to the wayside. Ultimately, like, and there's a difference between, like, if you like Mike Leach put somebody with you can't even say reportedly, he admitted, put somebody with a concussion in a dark shed and got fired for it. Okay, well, that's a little different. Like that's you're being an a-hole rather than somebody died. And that's a big deal. And so I don't know the answer to the question of today's episode. I don't know. And I think it's important to admit when you don't know. I don't question whether Hugh Freeze is making a drastic, somewhat desperate move at the defensive coordinator spot to hire somebody who has the baggage that DJ Durkin has. But at the same time, and I guess I don't know the answer of, does every time somebody with baggage like that, does this have to come up every time that their name is mentioned? That like, oh, DJ Durkin's going to be the defensive coordinator at Auburn. By the way, was the head coach at Maryland when a kid died. Is Deshaun Watson going to be permanently as like, oh, he's the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. He used to be in Houston, but he got accused of sexually assaulting 26 massage therapists. And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how the perfect way to handle that is. And I think the answer is probably there is no perfect way to handle that. And the answer is different for everybody. What my answer is for should DJ Durkin be the defensive coordinator at Auburn might differ drastically from what your answer is. And that's okay. I think it's okay to have differing opinions. But I know how I feel about it. Ultimately, it's complicated. It is not black and white. And as much as I would love to make it a black and white, it's not. I would love to tell you that college football is a business, and by God, if that's the collateral damage of what happens in running the business and getting the business to be run as efficiently and as perfectly as you can get it, then that's just what it's gonna take. And then there's a human aspect of it that somebody lost their son, their brother, cousin, friend, teammate, and it's by straight up negligence, by flat out incompetence. And I struggle with that. So all I can think about it is from my perspective of, as a fan, what I want my team to hire that guy to be our defensive coordinator. No. Because there are, like, I believe in second chances and things like that to a point. There are some, like, a mistake is using a teaspoon instead of a tablespoon. When a football player dies during one of your workouts after he had collapsed and you made his teammates pick him up and finish his drills, that's not a mistake. That's a series of really poor decisions. And should that series of really poor decisions have come with consequences? Yeah, they should. Absolutely. DJ Durkin ultimately lost the job that he had and was quasi blacklisted for a while. And I think justifiably and rightfully so. A player died under somebody's supervision that was directly under you, that you had set the guidelines that you wanted them to meet. You're going to have to go in that situation. But how long should you have to sit out because of it? I don't think the answer is forever, but I also don't know. And I don't know that DJ Durkin could ever give a satisfactory answer to this question. Like, how do you learn from that? Other than, like, we're going to make sure nobody dies again. Like, obviously that's going to be the goal, right? Obviously that's going to be the baseline. Like, hey, the one requirement that we're going to have going forward is no kids are going to die during our workouts. But if it can even get to that point, how do you change that much? How do you change so drastically that you can get to a point where you don't even recognize the person that was leading the program where that happened? And again, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. Is it possible? Is it possible to go from the leader of an organization that ultimately led to the death of a college football player, and then what is it, 6 years later? 6 years later? Not even 6 years later? You question how you could even let that happen under your watch. I don't know. I think it's possible. But again, I don't know. But I think those questions persist. And unfortunately for DJ Durkin, and I realize that can sound crass to, like, the family of Jordan McNair, the quotation, unfortunately for DJ Durkin. But unfortunately for DJ Durkin, that's going to follow you forever. And rightfully so. But I don't know what the answer is to how long the punishment should be. I don't know how, like, is time the only thing that heals that? Is time the only thing that takes care of the idea that you are saddled with the death of a player? Probably. Because I don't think there's anything you can say or do. If DJ Durkin was to come out today and say, yeah, you know what, that happened. It's absolutely terrible. I hate that it happened. It tears me up every day. I think for a big chunk of the people paying attention, the response is like, well, yeah, it should. It should bother you. It should keep you awake at night. But whether that should preclude you from having a job in this industry or not, I don't know. I don't think so. But I don't know how long that time period is. I don't know how, and especially I don't know how you explain that away to recruits or their parents. And maybe it's been long enough that people forget. Maybe it's been long enough that it just is not on top of anybody's mind, or that they're not going to do a Google search for their kid's potential defensive coordinator. But if you search DJ Durkin and you go to his Wikipedia page just to see, like, I wonder where this guy has been the coach before, and that pops up. You had no idea that Jordan McNair died during the workout while DJ Durkin was the head coach of the University of Maryland. You had no idea. How do you ask that question and come away with a satisfactory answer that was like, oh, you know what? That's not going to happen to my son. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. And I don't know that one exists. I don't know that there is a way to say, oh, well, let me tell you about that. And that guy could expound upon it for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. And he could make all the sense in the world. But in the back of my mind, I would still think, man, I don't know. It happened once. And I realized that once is enough to, like, you're probably going to make sure it's never going to happen again. But that's a tough one for me to get over. So is it worth it for Hugh Freeze? Again, I think the answer is I don't know. It's a super delicate eggshell tightrope to walk. You got to do what you think is best for your program, your university, your athletic department. DJ Durkin's got to do what he thinks is best for him and his family. And I think it's maybe slightly different in a, I guess, is it like a non-leadership role, or I don't even know if that's in a non-coordinator role. Is it different? I think so. But like after it happened, like DJ Durkin was a consultant with the Atlanta Falcons for a year, right? Like that's a completely different thing, a completely different situation, and much easier to palate from the general public standpoint. Because, you know, you're a consultant in the NFL. Like, you don't have any leadership qualities. You're not in charge of anything, blah, blah, blah. And I realize that this is not a, like, new phenomenon, that he's been at Ole Miss. He's been at Texas A&M. Like, so he's coached at, like, 3/4 of the SEC at this point, which, again, I'm going to avoid the SEC self-importance. But, and this isn't a newfound thing. It comes up now because DJ Durkin is going to be the defensive coordinator at Auburn after being at A&M and now needing a new job. But I just don't know the answer to that question of, and whether this is a question that should have been held in 2020 when there were a lot bigger fish to fry during 2020 when he was then hired at Ole Miss. I don't know the answers to these questions, but I think they're worth asking. I think they're worth pondering. I think they're worth assessing in your own mind of, how do I feel about this? How should I feel about this? Because I can't answer how you should feel about this. All I could answer is how I feel about it. I can't tell you one way or another. And I don't think, very rarely am I ever going to sit here and tell you how you should feel about something. It was when I did sports talk radio. There was one time that I can remember that I said, like, hey, if you think this, you are wrong. And it was basically, I had a phone caller tell me that in 2021, that winning the Rose Bowl was more important than winning the national championship. That is incorrect. No, it is not. So I have no bearing on how you should feel. All I know is how I feel. And I don't know that I would struggle to hire somebody. I would struggle to employ. I would struggle to work with somebody who had that in their background. And maybe DJ Durkin is a flat out changed man. Maybe he is incredibly remorseful and has done things behind the scenes, not publicly, for the accolades to rectify the situation or to share his disappointment, displeasure, sorrow for what happened as he was the leader of that program. But ultimately, is that worth taking a chance on? For me, the answer is no, but I can't answer that question for Hugh Freeze, for the Easter Bunny, George Carlin, or anybody else. I can only answer it for me. But I do think it's worth pondering and asking yourself the question, how do I feel about this? How long is too long? How long is the right amount of punishment? Should there be any punishment? Was he wronged? I think those are all fair and worthy questions. But I also think it's important. I think it's fair and worthy to say, I don't know, when you don't know. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all that great college football content that we are pumping out here on Saturday Glory. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Same bad time and the same bad channel right here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.